you see all this like abundance around you, that it really starts to make you question, like, how could I ever think that I don't have access to this?
Yes. Yeah.
And it changed how I started approaching my conversations, how I started approaching my work, how I started thinking about my finances, how I started thinking about life, my friends, my relationships, everything.
Meaning that you started approaching them from an abundant space?
From an abundant space, and not from a space of rationalizing with God on if I can have it or not. Because at that point, I realized that what I experienced there was that you have access to all of this too. And it was those experiences.
Hey, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. I just love my guest for this episode, Jahari Soward. Just a dynamic young businesswoman. And we are talking about how she weaves spirituality through her life. And that is what I love about this podcast, being able to talk to people about their relationship with God, what God means to them, what their higher power means to them, whether they call that entity God or whatever you call that entity. I love having the conversations about how you weave this into your day-to-day life. Jahari and I, our conversation was especially poignant for me. We talked some about the loss of her dad. This is the 20th anniversary of his passing. And we talk about how losing someone so significant in her life landed for her spiritually, emotionally, of course, and how she was able to move forward. We all experience loss, and that's why I love to have conversations about things that we can relate to. And we all experience stress. We all experience questions on our journey and revelations. And we get to these types of things in our conversation. We became friends years ago through the jazz club in Atlanta, the former jazz club in Atlanta, Cafe 290, which I have talked about recently because I am doing a separate podcast honoring this former nightclub. And Jahari and I had talked for that recording, and it was such an opportunity to bring her over into this space and have a conversation with her. So let's get to it. Let's meet her and let's start healing. Welcome, Jahari.
Thanks for having me here.
This is exciting. I love having you on Let's Start Healing.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited to be here. This is going to be good.
Yeah. So, gosh, I like to talk to people about their spiritual journey and what God means to them. And I just want to jump right into your dad, because I just learned really what your dad means to you and meant to you. And I also lost my dad as a young adult. And so that impact is great. And I know that he's with you and you feel him with you. And so I wish you would just talk about your relationship and what he was like. And
oh, man, Dad was amazing. I know that you lost your father as well, but he really was the best dad, you know? He really was the best dad. I mean, he was my best friend, you know?
Yeah.
And so...
And he passed in 2002, and this is the 20th anniversary.
This is the 20th anniversary. And this year was special, right? Because of this moment of reflection where you go back and you think about, you know, what you were doing when it happened, what it felt like, recalling the memory of everything. Even though it's been 20 years, it feels like it was just yesterday in many ways. And so my dad and my mom were married for over 30 years. So that was the only man I always saw.
Yeah.
You know, definitely the first person that ever demonstrated love to me.
Yeah.
And or male that demonstrated love to me. And most certainly, I looked like my dad. So the two of us were always, lock and key together. I took off after a lot of my the things that my father enjoyed. So he was a jazz musician. So, of course, I played music, played violin and piano for about 10, 12 years and really enjoyed the music. And then I tried to play drums with my dad, and he was a little rough on me.
He was a drummer.
He was a drummer. So he was a little rougher than I had expected.
Like, what are you doing? That's not how you do it.
Like, that's not it. So, and he would actually have me like just do taps, like, tap, 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 tap. And I would, like, Dad, give me something more. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
But it was really important because it was showing you how to keep a rhythm, to keep a beat. And I think about my father all the time because I actually talk about the legacy that he left me and his beauty and just all of the lessons in being a drummer. If you think about, my dad used to do this thing around Dr. King and the drum major instinct and what that meant. And so growing up, he would literally go to schools throughout the Milwaukee community and actually nationally and talk about Dr. King being a drum major for peace and a drum major for justice and the drum major's instinct and what that really means. And you saw this nexus of music and social justice and music and peace and music and equality. And I don't know if I really understood what it was all about until I got older. As I started to further investigate jazz and music, I fell in love with John Coltrane. And I remember having this conversation with my dad probably about 2 years before he passed away. And we talked about the beloved community.
Yeah.
And when you think of the beloved community, oftentimes you think about it through Dr. King, Malcolm X, and John Coltrane. And most people are like, wait a minute, where did John Coltrane come in all of this? But those three had a very symbiotic relationship in how they defined spirituality.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful because my father talked about the song Love Supreme actually has three songs to it. And it really talks about, you really see this point of like the beginning, if you listen to it, kind of this plight, and then this kind of downside of peace. And it really was, it's hard to describe it, but it was really this, the plight is kind of like at the point where things got really bad in his life. And then when he met his wife and the change that started to happen. But that's also the same change that Dr. King wanted. And it was the same change that Malcolm X saw at the end of his life. And so that was really like this beloved community. And how do you start to build this more?
Yeah.
And it just so happens that oftentimes it happens right at the tail end of someone's life. But that's their time. But it's what they leave, and the legacy that they leave that matters.
It's so funny. A Love Supreme, I have always thought this song is so spiritual. It's so spiritual. And I can't remember who just passed away. A musician just passed, a long time musician. And when the story was on the news, they would refer to the era of Coltrane and Dizzy Gillespie and Duke Ellington and all of that, and which he was actually, Duke Ellington was before them. But anyway, they said it was referred to as spirit music. I never knew that. I had never heard that before. Had you ever heard that before?
I did. And my dad talked about it a lot, which is why I think I took such an interest in that music, that type of music in jazz. And so, my dad would say that is jazz music, and nothing else matters.
Yes.
But it was really, I always think about what was he trying to tell me, in that conversation. And then I think back to the conversations I wish I would have been able to have with my dad around it as I began to learn more and investigate more. Unfortunately, it was just discussions I thought I would be able to have at any given time.
Right.
I didn't know that it would happen so soon. I lost my father right after college. So I was 23, 22, 23, and had lost dad.
Wow. I was 21. And, to tell you something really amazing is my father was always really vivid for me in my dreams. That's a huge blessing for me, how much he was in my dreams. So he was gone for, 30 years maybe before my mom passed. And so because he was always so close to me spiritually in my dreams, and I really needed to hold on to my mom, spiritually. So I said to my father in my spirit, now I'm going to have to put you on the back burner, because I needed her to not leave me. Like before she passed, I said, you cannot leave me, and so what started happening, I'm ready to bring him back in, and I started having dreams about him, and the dreams were that he had abandoned the family. It felt like that because he died. So he might pop up in my dreams, and it would be like he really didn't want to stay. Like he would be here, he really couldn't stay long. That's not really where he wanted to be. And my father he and my mom were together for over 30 years. And I was just like, what is this? And I realized that I was upset with him for dying. And so I started to write in my journal to him and forgive him for dying. And then the dreams stopped.
Yeah.
That type of dream. He would show up and it would just be a regular him showing up in my dream.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
That is so, wow. I mean, it's interesting. I too would have very vivid dreams of my father, and certainly, went through the stages right, of grieving, where I most certainly had to wrestle with him not being there and not seeing pivotal moments, for me, like my first child and celebrating, my marriage and those type of things. But I know that he's there, I know he's present. And I always remember probably the day that he was transitioning, he opened his eyes and he would squeeze his hand or squeeze my hand. I would let him listen to John Coltrane music, and he was trying to speak. Yeah. He couldn't say any words.
Did he have a stroke?
He had a stroke. And so it was just like, you couldn't hear him. But it was almost as if you would say something, he would be quiet, and then he would try to say something. Yeah. It was almost like I could see through his eyes what he was trying to say. And it was enough for me. Yeah,
you could communicate with him.
It's good. Those moments, those memories, I recall we went to church right after that and prayed, and my mom is a minister, so of course, we were going to praise the Lord for what we had seen. And just that moment, I would have then learned later that is a moment in the stage. Yeah. But at the time, I was like, this is a miracle, and so, but it was a miracle that I got a chance to see that I got a chance to experience it. And that was really the closure.
Yeah. He had to be young. Was he 50s or?
54. So very young. And, my father at the time, my dad was the oldest, and there was not a member of our male bloodline in the Sword family that had lived to see 54.
Wow. Yeah. That is similar in my family. My father was 50. His brother was 46. Wow. And my nephew, who's 40, and so we have smokers and drinkers, in my family. But my nephew is, pretty healthy lifestyle. But he was saying to me that the average age he feels of a male in our family is like late 50s. My brother was 55 when he passed, and my oldest brother, who recently passed, was 64. I wanted to disagree with him because I want to sum it up to the lifestyles that everybody had, but it's that and more, maybe.
Yeah. And ultimately it's lifestyle. There's genetics that, could also play into it, and health issues that we may not know because we don't talk about some things, in our families. And it's just, when God says it's time, it's time.
And we have our own journeys.
Right. And so I'm a firm believer that it was the memories, the impressions that he left, the ability to make me laugh. And really give me that peace.
Yeah.
And knowing that I was the most beautiful thing to him. Like those moments, you can't get them back, but you also know how much it meant in my journey as a woman.
Yeah.
So I recall my moments of like the debutante and the cotillion and my first dance with my dad and, all of these things that we were able to experience together, and, all of the plays and things I was in that he would accompany me.
Are you the youngest?
Yes, I am. So I'm the youngest.
Yeah.
Daddy's little girl for sure.
Wow. Well, something I feel like compelled to say is that my brother who passed, he's only been gone about 7 years, and his daughter, truly, they were best friends. Truly. So, and he also has a son and they were close. And something for me, being a spiritual person, like, I am 1,000% clear that he is able to help them and bless them from where he is in a way that he couldn't when he was here. Right. I can see that, really, really clearly.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think my dad is my angel. Actually, this necklace I have on, this is for him. So there's a statement on it that he kind of always left with me. But I think that he guides and directs me oftentimes and steers me away from things that I may not always, be as keen on.
Yeah.
I remember my father would say, "You're so smart, but you are so dumb, Jahari." And so he would always talk about this academic and book knowledge that I would have, and then this like street knowledge that probably wasn't, that I didn't really pick up all the dots. But what I loved about it was he was right?
Yeah,
I didn't always, but he protected me, from maybe some of the naivete that I had. It was making sure that there were people around me that were a little bit more street smart than I was.
But that's what makes you you.
Yeah.
I can relate. That's what I don't have the book knowledge that you have, but the naivete.
Yeah.
I get it.
What? What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's what makes you you.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We would always laugh at it, But I have been blessed to have men in my life that really, my uncles and my boyfriend, the people in my life that really, they remind me so much of my dad. They carry pieces of him. And sometimes it's the laughter and the humor and the protectedness, and being there, the guidance, the wisdom.
Yeah.
I'm able to hear that and see that in so many people that I'm like, he just has them guiding me, right now. But he is most certainly there.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if I would be who I am today, without that one experience happening, because it really has shaped so much of who I am and who I became.
You mean the last moments with him?
The last moments, and just, I always said when my father passed away, life was never the same again.
Right.
Like it was in that moment, it changes instantly.
Yes.
Because what you start to take on looks different.
Mm-hmm.
Your responsibilities look different. You have to grow up quickly.
Yeah.
And the things you value start to change, and how you assess relationships and people and things around you changed as a result of my father's death.
Yeah.
So I made different choices. I think because of, just having to deal with that so young, I don't think I would have made those same choices had he been around. I mean, I just, was a little bit more carefree. So I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So, it's all good.
I like to ask people, what God means to them. And when I ask that question, I understand that God can be different things for different people. Some people, God is nature, or they don't even use the word God. And not everyone is a Christian. And so it's all love with this podcast.
Yeah.
And so I want to just know, what is God? Who is God to you? And how do you weave that power through you in your life?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because, again, growing up in the church all my life, with my mom being a minister, I think I grew up thinking God was one thing. And there was times where I didn't know if he was as, I think the type of church that I grew up in and the culture of the church may have made me think at times that it had to be one way. All the time, and if it wasn't this way, your hand is
shame
slapped,
on you. Yeah.
But what I know of God is that he is the most important thing in my life. He is the center of what I do and how I do it. And for me, Jesus and God is all one, right? So I believe in the Holy Trinity, and I believe in the gospel, and I don't treat them, kind of separate. It's just one entity as far as I'm concerned. And so for me, it's the prayers, it's the reading. But what I find is that there's these lessons that I learn, and this could be the same scripture, the same thing that I'm reading, but it changes and morphs depending on what is going on in my life for the moment. So I'm not confined to one way, but instead open to whatever he needs to share with me at that time.
Yeah.
I refer to God as a he,
Yeah.
because that was how I was, raised to think of him. And I know it's spiritual. It could be he, she,
Right.
whomever, but I refer to him as he. And he most certainly has been merciful and graceful and given me grace. I recall so many moments in my life where I've made some really big mistakes and where I've most certainly fallen short, but I'm constantly reminded of like his grace and his mercy for me.
Yeah.
And how he extends his hand to me and says, it's okay. And so that same hand that he's extending is almost like it shows up in so many parts of my life. And it's not always like, hey, Jahari, come here. I'm always here and present with you. It's not that, but it's this instinct, this.
Like a knowing,
that now I don't just pray to him when things are bad, that I'm honoring him, when things are great. I'm honoring him when I wake up. And it doesn't feel like the traditional pray to God when things are bad, but it's just acknowledge the fact that he's present,
right?
And acknowledge the fact that he's in my life, and acknowledge the fact that without him, I wouldn't be who I am. And so I'm learning throughout my journey that God is more than just the person you go to when things are messed up, and it's more than the person that you go to on Easter and Christmas, and these holidays. But now it's acknowledge who he is in your life and what he means to you and what he brings to me. I think I see God in everything. Literally. I mean, it's life. It's like this thing I can't really even describe. I don't even know how do you ask that question? It's just, it's such a faith walk, and every day I'm growing with it, and I'm learning more and more to not treat it like it's church,
Yeah.
but just treat it like it's my own relationship with Christ. And whether I'm doing yoga for the day, whether I'm reading the Bible, or whether I'm reading a passage, I see him present in all of it. And, they say that the Bible, it's significant of like the lessons before you leave the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I really strongly believe that is why it has stood the test of time, and why his word stands the test of time. Because no matter what is going on in my life, I could literally read a passage today and it mean one thing, and read the same passage,
and it
3
means
months
something
later,
else.
it means something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be the same thing, but I got something different out of it each time. And it's not, because I have that theology or anything like that, but just simply because that's what he wanted me to read, to hear, to decipher.
What do you think God wants you to do for you and yourself through your work?
These are really deep questions. I probably should have.
What do you think that God wants you to do for you in life?
Yeah, I may have to come back and do this podcast. I don't know. I have to think about this. These are like very deep questions.
Okay.
Like,
let me.
Girl, give me the blueprint on this one. We may have to come back and do this one.
Okay. Let me phrase this a different way. And I've been thinking, because I heard A-Rod, the ex-baseball player, talk about his superpower. And he said that his superpower is that he's able to get back up after adversity. I was thinking about my superpower, and my superpower is that I see people, like I see like the authentic person, whether they're behaving authentically or not. I see the authentic person of who God created. And so that's always what I'm trying to connect with. And I like to use the word intimate, like we think of intimate a certain way, but to me, that connection can be through laughing or bonding over something that you're reading, or sports, or anything, but you just kind of see each other, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's my superpower. And I can see, you're so great at this. Like I see the person, and then I see what they're so great at. And that's what I think they should be doing in life, which is not a superpower.
Right,
that's just, but I just see their gift. And what I do believe, and not that I have the whole answer to it, but I do believe that my purpose is tied to that. And that's why this podcast means so much to me. But I also acknowledge that, maybe God wants me to do something with this and more,
Right.
I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, no, I think with that context, it's very helpful. I think I have the ability, right, that when people have shared their dreams and goals, that, I'm very strategic and I'm very analytical, but I think God has allowed me to use that and connect the community to like what does this mean? Help them see it, really see who they could be. And I hate that that's very cliche, but
the bigger picture, and believe in themselves,
how they can get there. Mm-hmm. So I think about the work that I do in the community and why I do it. Right?
Talk about some of that a little bit.
And, I have my Esteem Kits, and of course I do things with youth and help them really see who they can be with STEM education. But I also lead programs in the community for women and for children and youth, so they can really just explore like parts of digital literacy and understand more about their career goals. And I think so many times we wrap ourselves, like we sometimes define ourselves by our career. And that is very dangerous, because if you don't get there, you have lived your life defining yourself by this one idea, when the reality is that in that one idea, God is present in all of it, and you can still achieve everything that he wants you to achieve and that you want to achieve through it. But it's also knowing, like charting a path on what that looks and feels like. And so if I can not necessarily chart the path for them, but if I can have a role and how someone charts that path, then I think that is my purpose. You know, how do I help them get to the next level or get to where they want to be in this small moment of time? But if I can be a part of that journey, then I feel like I'm doing the work of God. And I'll be honest with you, I remember being in church, and I go to Community Church of God, and I remember being in church, and there was a large number of our percentage of our congregation that didn't have a job. And I almost felt like God was telling me, start this job ministry program, help people, like help them with their resumes, help them with these things. And I was like, is that really all you want me to do, is like help them get it, help them with their resume and stuff? But I didn't realize the impact that one job ministry really did. It gave people hope. It gave people a purpose. So many people afterwards said, I would sit at home not knowing what to do next. And coming here gave me hope. Coming here made me feel like I had a purpose. And that wasn't necessarily the intentionality, but the fact that that's what people were getting out of it was exactly what it was supposed to do, you know? And so I may have thought of it as a job ministry. What God saw out of it was, no, I want you to give people hope, and I want you to help them reach their purpose. Not that you are responsible for it, but I want you to be the conduit for that. And so for me, it was, how do I do more of this? You know, and how do I do it in a way that people don't feel like they have to pick and choose their family or pick and choose what's important to them to make this happen? Like, this is available to you, you know?
Talk about the job ministry and what that looked like. Yeah.
So it was really just, you know, I did it once a week, and it was bringing in employers and helping individuals really understand more about themselves and how they show up, you know, in an employment situation, or, you know, with an employer. It was going through like DISC analysis and some personality assessments, but also showing them how do you take this and really identify the right culture within an organization that may be the best fit for you. Or how do you work with people, or how do you think about your communication strategies, or how do you think about how, when conflict comes to you at work, how you handle it? It was the resumes, it was the interviewing, it was the job prep, it was providing them digital literacy skills and making sure that they felt confident in how they showed up to work, that they could do it, you know, that everything that you have is, you know, everything that you want, you really already have. And I think when you grow up in a environment where things are scarce, you can feel like this is all I have access to. And you start to think through like a scarcity model. But when you grow up and not really grow up, but when you change your thinking pattern to more abundance, that everything you want, God is going to give it to you.
Yes.
Everything. And so that abundance mindset makes you available. I mean, it's like arms stretched wide, and it's almost like, just give it to me. And you literally are sitting there in a posture of receiving. Because it's like everything around you is available to you. And you don't think about, if I just had this, it's like it changes your words. It changes what you say out of your mouth. It's no longer, if I just had, it's when you're ready. I'm ready to receive when you give it to me.
It's, you know, being willing.
It's surrendering.
It is.
It literally is like the difference, right? Of him being present and you being willing to say, I surrender all because I'm doing it for you. Or let me just get this piece. Let me get this piece. And if you would, and it's like rationalizing with God, you know, the way that I think sometimes, at least I grew up thinking at church, like, if I do this, God, will you do this? You know, like,
I used to be that way.
That mindset. But now it's like, I know that my biggest dreams, He can give them all to
and
me.
Beyond.
And beyond. You know, on things I didn't even see. And the scriptures they feel different. You know, these lessons resonate differently with me now. which is why I can read it and I
Yeah.
like says something completely different, tomorrow I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, but it really is,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing.
I had a revelation about myself, or an awareness, just in the last couple of days that relates to that. And really is tied to my dad too. So my dad was a cop, and he worked second job doing security at the mall at a couple of different stores. And he would bring me home clothes. And, he would get these clothes at a discount, and he would bring me home clothes. And it was really overwhelming. I would get all these clothes and I'd just be like, And he and my mom thought that I didn't say thank you. And so thank you is a really big thing for me now, as an adult. Like, I have to make sure people know how much I appreciate gestures. And so, but it wasn't that I wasn't grateful. It was that I was overwhelmed and I didn't think I deserved it. And I mean, I would be like 11, 12, that age range. And so now when people do things for me out of the blue, because I've had recently a couple of people have done a couple things for me just out of nowhere, it's a lot. I'm just like, I have to like take a moment before I can even say thank you, because I feel like I don't deserve it, but I do deserve it. I'm changing in the moment to a shift of acceptance and allowing. And, yes, people can do things for me, and people do things for me all the time, but it's just that out of the blue thing, it triggers that feeling. And so it's amazing, because you were talking about, how limited people can be in their thoughts, because maybe they haven't been exposed to things.
Right.
And it can be interesting how far back some of our mindsets can go. And I don't even know where I got that idea from.
Right.
I mean, my parents gave me anything I wanted as a kid. I was the only girl. I was the youngest. So where did I get that from? I don't know.
Right.
So it's really something, the things that we can teach ourselves.
For sure. For sure. What's so funny is that about 3-4 months ago, I was invited to the Arthur Blank Ranch out in Montana.
You have the most fascinating experience.
It was a fantastic opportunity, and we were there for a week.
Wait, how long ago were you there?
In June. Back about 3-4 months ago.
Okay.
And so I get invited to his ranch. The number of acres, like just the size was uncanny. And you're there for a week with other leaders in the nonprofit community. And the lessons that it taught me was, it was an opportunity to connect with nature, but connect with your spirituality. And it not only put me in a posture of gratefulness, but not gratefulness because of the things that I received at the ranch, but it was gratefulness because of what I saw. And it was like the first time I really got a chance to sit back and reflect on the beauty of nature. And land, and feeling the air, and like taking it in and having a moment to breathe. And you see all this like abundance around you, that it really starts to make you question, like, how could I ever think that I don't have access to this?
Yes. Yeah.
And it changed how I started approaching my conversations, how I started approaching my work, how I started thinking about my finances, how I started thinking about life, my friends, my relationships, everything.
Meaning that you started approaching them from an abundant space?
From an abundant space, and not from a space of rationalizing with God on if I can have it or not. because at that point I realized that what I experienced there was that you have access to all of this too. And it was those experiences. It was, it wasn't as if it was expensive. Now the ranch was definitely expensive, and all of the things that we did was most certainly pricey. Yeah. However, what you were getting out of it was not those things. It was like very esoteric, very personal, and that was to me the joy. Yeah, the joy was, maybe the first time I think in my life that I had ever really spent time to just sit back and reflect. And maybe the only time that I had a moment to just sit still and walk a labyrinth and sit still and feel his energy around me and sit still and just enjoy the stillness of it. And it was like I just saw him show up in so many different places throughout that entire week that it really shifted. It shifted how I approached other conversations and even my friendships with people. It shifted that, and what I wanted to do next and how I wanted to show up as friends for them was to also be what he was for me in those moments of stillness. It was like a good listener.
What was the context of the conference or event?
So the retreat was a entrepreneurial leadership retreat. It was all around the work that we do for the community, how we continue to serve, support, and show up for the community, but also giving ourselves times as leaders to just sit still and enjoy nature. And so we did yoga and fly fishing and golf and horseback riding, all of these different things. But each time you were experiencing a different element, whether it was wind, fire,
to replenish.
Water. And it was like this moment of replenishing. It was very beautiful. Most certainly was a sacred place, but hearing like the birds and the way in which we eat, you can sometimes be on a go so much that you start to schedule God in. But in those moments, it was like, even though you had so much stuff going on, you started to see him in everything that you were doing versus just show up during this time that, on Sunday at, from 10 to 12, but like, no, I see you in everything I do now, and I look for my friends to show up with God in them. And if not, I think my spirit rejects it. Because I don't want those influences. I don't want people without those influences in my space that much. So that's why I said it changed really how I approached so many parts of my life and what I said yes and no to. Because I need to see that in everything.
I think that's 1,000%. I think that's a shift that a lot of people in the world are starting to realize, in different ways. Just last night, I was thinking to myself, I feel that God wants me to put myself first in every way, and I think I put myself first, in many ways, but that's not the answer. The answer is every way, because that's the only way. I do believe that we are supposed to be in service to each other.
For sure.
And the only way we can do that is by really putting ourselves first, getting that replenishment, allowing ourselves to be open to creativity. We can't be open to creativity if we're under siege, and put ourselves under siege and under pressure all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think the epiphanies that we get, like these moments of clarity, right, that we get because we're in his presence, makes such a difference. And we just have to remind ourselves that moment of clarity isn't just for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like that moment of clarity is because I want you to now act on that consistently.
Yes.
You know? And so for me, I've been really intentional on how I have, like the things I say yes to, you know, and it's almost like my own internal rubric that I need. But because that experience was such a reminder for me of like what has to happen. And if these elements are not there, if this spirit that I just felt is not there consistently, then this is a no.
Yeah. And then,
You know?
like you were saying a few minutes ago, like you'll feel it in your spirit too.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's him.
Right.
You know, like that's the Holy Spirit.
Right. Right.
You know, so I mean that's what it is. So
Wow.
it's yeah. So that's my answer.
Oh God. Okay.
It's like, did I have to go through all of these different stories to get there? But
Well,
you know,
so in a minute, I want you to share how people can get in touch with you.
yes.
Before that, I want to ask you, is there something, and you shared the moment with your dad before he passed, is there a moment of any kind of experience where you said you experienced a miracle or a blessing and you said that was totally God? I had absolutely nothing to do with this.
There's a lot of those moments. And I hate to say it, but now I can see those moments a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't think it's like one particular moment. I see things happen all around me. And I know that it's just his grace and favor on my life that has protected me and guided me and shielded me from making some very terrible decisions, you know, or his favor on my life that has said, don't do that. Don't go this direction. And every time it's a don't, or it's a opening the doorway for other opportunities for me to walk in those other opportunities, is I know that it's all ordered by him. And so I would almost be crazy to just pick one of those moments because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time, you know. I guess if there was one moment and I had to really identify it, I'll just share this one part. So right after my father passed, or as I was going through counseling, my therapist had me do this timeline. And I had to write down from like birth all the way to like my age.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm charting like highs and lows in my life. And then, of course, the death of my father was like the biggest low.
Right.
And so that was like the deepest line that I could identify as probably the biggest pain or hurt that I had experienced ever. And then I had some highlights, and then I had some lows. And there almost was a trend of lows for a period of time. And not that there wasn't high points
Right.
in, you know, throughout months or, you know, day or whatever. But if I had to look at it through the year, there was like some years that were better than others. But there was like a trend that I started to see of like after my father's death, there was a trend of some probably not so great years in comparison to those that were. And what it showed me was that maybe I had dealt with his grief, and how I responded to it was poor decisions in my life. Not knowingly, I thought I was making the right decision, but maybe didn't always turn out the way I had expected it to, because maybe I was hazy and not seeing things clearly. I then started to see when it shifted, and then it was these like high points consistently. And I think it was when I started surrendering and when I started giving him more time. And then I saw this other peak of the moments that I said, like, yes. And I saw this other set of peaks. And now, as
Yes
I look,
to.
yes to, I've always said yes to God, right? But like at this point, it was like yes to whatever you want from me, without any hesitation. Where before it was like, I think the answer was yes, but, and now it was yes. And it was this faith walk. And so I think when you're on the faith walk, I mean, every day is, these moments that you know it's just God that's getting you there.
Yeah.
My mom being sick with COVID, having had illness and other things that were setbacks, and now seeing how she is just doing so well, and that's just God.
Yeah.
And my mom, she says, being an overcomer means that you don't let the situations continue to happen. So you can get through something.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that you got through it and the next thing will happen. But when you overcome something, it means that you don't let it happen again. It doesn't show back up in your life consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And so she always says, I'm more than an overcomer, Jahari. And I'm like, you really are, because those moments happened.
Yeah.
But my mom has gotten through all of it. And I know that it was because the hand of God on her life.
Right.
And there was no way you can explain it any other way other than he was there,
Mm-hmm.
But he's always there.
Right,
so,
right. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this. This was so fantastic.
Yeah.
I had no idea what this was going to be like, but I love this.
Oh.
And I love what you're doing with this.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, the number of people that you're impacting, and your love for this and passion for it.
Thank you so much. How can people reach you? What's the best way to find you?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn at LinkedIn.com. I am Jahari Sword. All my Twitter and Instagram handles is just my name, Jahari Sword. So I make it really easy. It's no extra things. But, of course, on LinkedIn, on my Instagram, and on my Facebook, just Jahari Sword.
Well, thank you. Spell your name for everyone.
Yeah, so that's JAHARISOWARD.
Thank you so much, Jahari.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all of our podcast episodes on traditional podcast platforms. That includes those major ones: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can listen to all of our episodes there and elsewhere. And you can also reach me through social media or by email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, let's start healing.